Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Taliban say the conditional release of 1,500 prisoners ordered by the Afghan government goes against the Doha deal. Earlier, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani signed a decree to release Taliban prisoners on 4 conditions.
Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen says under the accord, the intra-Afghan talks were to open after the release of 5,000 prisoners. The spokesman said the Taliban have never agreed to the conditional release of prisoners. The president's spokesperson Sadiq Siddiqui said earlier the Taliban's written promise not to return to violence is among the preconditions for the swap. He said once intra-Afghan talks begin, the government will release 500 prisoners every 2 weeks. But the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission says prisoners accused of war crimes should not be released. U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said the Taliban have already agreed to release up to 1,000 Afghan government prisoners.
The United Nations has adopted a resolution supporting the Doha peace deal between the U.S. and the Taliban. U.S. Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad says the resolution demonstrates the international community's confidence in the peace process. More in this report.
Despite its early teething problems, the international community is throwing its weight behind the deal which aims to bring peace to war-torn Afghanistan. The UNSC resolution won the unanimous support of the 15-member council. It welcomes the intention of all Afghan parties to pursue the successful negotiation of an inclusive political settlement. But the US has warned Taliban that intensive violence can derail the peace process.
We acknowledge the Taliban have taken steps to stop attacks in cities and against major bases. But more needs to be done, and we urge them to also reduce violence against Afghan forces in the countryside to give intra-Afghan negotiations and peace the opportunities to succeed.
Welcoming the agreement, German envoy to the UN, Christoph Eusgen, emphasized on significance of intra-Afghan talks.
We call for a speedy start of the intra-Afghan negotiations, and we welcome the announcement of the negotiating team by the government of Afghanistan today and hope that outstanding issues on the prisoners exchange can be resolved without delay.
The intra-Afghan talks is the next step in the peace process to strike a power-sharing formula between the Taliban and the Kabul government.
The commander of the U.S. Central Command, Kenneth Mackenzie, says Washington supported the Taliban in the fight to push ISIS out of eastern Afghanistan. Mackenzie told the House Armed Services Committee the Taliban received limited U.S. support. The commander said he was confident of the Taliban's reduced relations with ISIS in the country, but less confident of their connection to Al-Qaeda. General Mackenzie said the U.S. has begun reducing its military footprint in Afghanistan. He said the U.S. will reach its target of 8,600 troops in Afghanistan by the middle of summer. He said there is no plan to further reduce forces after reaching the initial troops level. In the U.S., former Vice President Joe Biden has won the key battleground state of Michigan in the latest round of the Democratic primaries. Biden has also taken Missouri, Mississippi, and Idaho to end the hopes of his rival Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Results in the states of North Dakota and Washington are still being counted. Exit polls show younger voters and Muslims went for Sanders, with older voters and African Americans voting for Biden. Speaking in Philadelphia, Biden called for party unity.
And I want to thank Bernie Sanders and his supporters for their tireless energy and their passion. We share a common goal, and together we'll defeat Donald Trump.
Both campaigns have called off planned rallies in Cleveland, citing guidance from Ohio public health officials on the new coronavirus outbreak. Now moving on to Europe, where the political infrastructure has fallen prey to the novel coronavirus, with British and French MPs and cabinet ministers testing positive for the virus. In France, 4 MPs and a culture minister have been infected, while a junior health minister has tested positive in the UK. Details in this report.
Global hysteria is rising as the novel coronavirus continues to spread across the world. In Europe, the whole of Italy, a country of some 60 million people, has been placed under quarantine. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has cancelled all public gatherings and asked people to stay at home.
Saranno quindi
That means that people shall avoid on the whole territory to move unless motivated by three specific circumstances: important work reasons, urgent necessary reasons, or health reasons.
ragioni di lavoro.
In the Middle East, Iran has reported 54 new deaths, raising the toll to over 290. The UN has recommended Tehran temporarily release all political prisoners, saying dual and foreign nationals are at risk in Iranian jails. This comes after Iran temporarily released 70,000 prisoners on Monday. Meanwhile, the WHO warns that the outbreak is threatening to become a global pandemic and can cost the world economy up to $2 trillion.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real. But it would be the first pandemic in history that could be controlled. The bottom line is we're not at the mercy of the virus.
In the US, incoming White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has self-quarantined, saying he might have come into contact with an infected person. In Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo has also confirmed its first coronavirus case. Meanwhile, Mongolia has barred anyone from entering or leaving its cities for 6 days after reporting its first case of the disease.
U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has postponed his visit to Pakistan, India and Uzbekistan due to the rapid spread of the new coronavirus. Esper was scheduled to visit the region from 16th to 20th of March for the talks aimed at promoting the Afghan peace process. The Defense Secretary was scheduled to arrive in Islamabad on 19th of March for an overnight stay. In a statement, Pentagon spokesperson Elisa Farah said out of an abundance of caution, the Secretary has decided to postpone his travel. She said Esper will remain in the U.S. to help manage the Department of Defense respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. Pakistan's role in peace negotiations between the U.S. and the Taliban was lauded by the international community. Iran has reported 63 more deaths from the new coronavirus, raising the death toll to over 350. The health ministry says the total number of the cases has also risen to around 9,000. The capital, Tehran, has the most new infections with 256 cases. The central province of Isfahan followed with 170, and Simnan to the east of Tehran had 63. Iran is yet to officially impose quarantines, but authorities have repeatedly called on people to refrain from traveling. The outbreak is one of the deadliest outside China, where the spread has largely been curbed. 12 inmates have died in prison raids at 23 jails across Italy in the past 3 days in the unrest sparked by panic over the coronavirus. Inmates started fires and took workers as hostages before soldiers surrounded the buildings to prevent escapes. The Justice Ministry, which says the situation is now under control, blamed the deaths on drug overdoses that happened when prisoners broke into medical stores. The ministry said the unrest at prisons in Venice, Palermo and Pairelli, among others, has ended. The country's prisoner rights ombudsman blamed the riots on prison overcrowding and fears of the rapid spread of the coronavirus. The unrest began on Sunday over rule changes, including the suspension of family visits in jails to prevent the coronavirus from spreading. We have seen the problems, the lockdowns and the fear caused by the coronavirus. But what is it actually like to be infected with this virus? The patients and the survivors have spoken of their experiences in this report. Let's take a look.
The COVID-19 virus is part of the coronavirus family, like the ordinary seasonal flu. Symptoms include cough, fever, and shortness of breath. Severe cases can result in more dangerous symptoms, like pneumonia, stroke, and kidney failure. But these are only likely to be seen in senior citizens.
But I'm a young person and I'm healthy, so the symptoms I'm having are like a normal cold, like a flu. I had a little bit of fever, headache, general discomfort, but anyone would have thought it was just a cold.
As of 3rd March, the World Health Organization estimates the virus has a mortality rate of just 3.4%. This is far lower than the 2003 SARS virus, also a member of the coronavirus group, which had a mortality rate of 10%. Many patients say the most grueling part of being infected is the isolation.
I will stay in my house for about 14 days, and in these 14 days, the health authorities will monitor my situation. I live in a separate room in my home, and I use a separate bathroom. My wife and my son live in the other part of the house, but they are subject to the so-called quarantine too. Luckily, they are fine. They don't have any kind of symptoms.
The novel coronavirus has now been detected on 5 continents. The situation is already under control in the outbreak's epicenter, China's Wuhan city. So far, 100,000 people have been infected by the virus worldwide, out of which 4,000 have died.
In the U.S., the city of San Francisco is renting 30 recreational vehicles to homeless people, costing just about $440,000. The vehicles will be available for the people who have tested positive for the novel coronavirus. Find out why in this report.
San Francisco is trying to solve 2 problems at once. What to do for people who don't have a home, and what to do for people who tested positive for coronavirus. The answer, says the city, is to rent out 30 recreational vehicles to COVID-19 patients without a place to call home but need to be isolated. The RVs have been paid for by funds made available from an emergency declaration by Mayor London Breed.
Well, so as people are test positive, whether they are, they're identified through the public health system or through their healthcare provider, and it's determined that they do not have a safe place to self-isolate, then the Department of Public Health will work with the Emergency Operations Center to place people into these RVs.
Officials say the object of the exercise is to protect the city's most vulnerable people, including the 8,000 or so who live in shelters, on the streets, or with family and friends.
Well, I think that the mayor and the city has made it very clear that our number 1 priority is vulnerable populations, right? People that have older adults, people that have underlying medical conditions, people experiencing homelessness are often more susceptible.
At the moment, the city has confirmed 14 coronavirus cases. Nationwide, 3/4 of U.S. states have COVID-19, with nearly 1,000 cases and 29 deaths.
So time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Israeli forces have killed a Palestinian protester and wounded 13 others at the Mount Al-Arma in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian health officials say the Israeli military fired live rounds and rubber bullets at the protesters in the city of Nablus. Israeli forces also fired tear gas at the demonstrators. Medics say some of the protesters suffocated after inhaling the gas. Witnesses say Israeli soldiers even prevented ambulances from approaching the mount, which exacerbated the condition of those wounded. Israeli forces have killed over 350 Palestinians and wounded about 18,000 since March 2018. An Israeli court has rejected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plea to postpone the opening session of his corruption trial. A panel of judges of the Jerusalem District Court decided the trial will begin on 17th of March. The court said Netanyahu will be required to attend the opening session when the charges against him will be read. The Israeli Prime Minister has been indicted on accounts of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 separate criminal cases. Earlier this week, Netanyahu's lawyers asked the court to delay the opening the trial for 45 days. The lawyers said they needed scanned copies of the evidence against the Prime Minister. Netanyahu is the first incumbent Prime Minister to stand trial in the history of Israel. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has urged Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar to respect the UN brokered ceasefire for Libya. Meeting Haftar in Berlin, Merkel said steps should begin to open the political process and end the conflict. In a statement, Merkel's spokesman Stefan Seibert said the Chancellor discussed Libyan developments with Haftar. Seibert said Merkel stressed that there can be no military solution to the conflict. The statement said it is necessary to progress for a political process in line with the conclusions of the Berlin conference. 2 months ago, Merkel hosted an international Libya conference in Berlin to support a ceasefire and respect arms embargo. Libya has been torn by a raging civil war between the Government of National Accord and the Libyan National Army since April last year. In Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition has carried out 16 airstrikes on the districts of Hajar province. State media says the strikes hit Harad, Bakel al-Mair and Mehdi, among others. No casualties have been reported yet. The strikes come after the coalition said it foiled an attack on oil tanker off the Yemeni coast last week. Coalition spokesman Turki al-Maliki said the ship was sailing towards the Gulf of Aden when it was attacked by 4 small boats. Yemen has been racked by anarchy since 2014 when the Houthis overran much of the country, including the capital Sana'a. Turkey says it has killed 4 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. In a statement, Turkey's National Defense Ministry has said military operations backed by air power were carried out in the Kirkuk region. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapon caches and shelters used by the terrorists. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in the 30-year conflict. Turkey says it will not shy away from even stronger military action in Syria if the ceasefire agreement with Russia is broken. Speaking to lawmakers, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said small violations of the truce have already begun. Erdogan said Ankara's priority is to ensure the safety of the 12 observation posts it established in the region. Meanwhile, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar says the talks with Russia on implementing the agreement are positive and constructive. Akar's statement follows a meeting of military delegations from Turkey and Russia to discuss the agreement yesterday. In an interview, Akar said the two sides are working to prepare joint patrols on the key highway that are expected to begin on 15th of March. Ankara and Moscow agreed on the ceasefire last week to stem clashes in Idlib. In Bangladesh, 200 houses have been destroyed in a fire that swept through a slum in the Rupnagar area of the capital Dhaka. No casualties have been reported so far. The government says the burned area had over 1,000 hand-built huts and shelters. The officials say 155 fighters have been working to put out the blaze. The authorities say the cause of the fire is not yet known and law enforcement agencies will investigate the matter. Myanmar's parliament has blocked a bid by Aung San Suu Kyi's party to reduce the military's role in politics. Military MPs, who occupy 25% of the seats in the parliament, vetoed the changes. The amendments called for a gradual reduction of the number of military MPs in Myanmar's parliament. The blocked proposals would have removed a section naming the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Services as the Supreme Commander of the entire military. Lawmakers rejected removing the word disciplined from the definition of the country's political system as a genuine, disciplined and multi-party democratic system. Any changes to the charter require the approval of more than 3/4 of the lawmakers, which automatically gives the army an effective veto power. Pakistan Air Force's F-16 fighter jet has crashed during rehearsals for the Pakistan Day celebrations in the country's capital Islamabad. In a statement, the PAF said the accident occurred near Shakarpariya area of the capital. The Air Force said Wing Commander Noman Akram embraced martyrdom in the crash. The force said a board of inquiry has been ordered by the Air Headquarters to determine the cause of the accident. European markets are trading marginally higher as investors continue to speculate over the impact of the coronavirus and the oil price war. Emergency interest rate cuts by the Bank of England to inject stimulus has somewhat picked up market sentiments. CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 2.5% higher, while Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 2%. London's FTSE 100 is trading 1.5% higher ahead of UK's annual budget announcement. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses, closing over 2.5% lower. Nikkei 225 lost over 2% after investors parked their stakes in safe haven equities. Shanghai Composite traded nearly 1% lower. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil price has lost over 0.5%, shedding early gains amid ensuing price war between OPEC and Russia. Time to take a look at the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Special.